My philosophy in life is if you're feeling too comfortable in what you're doing, you're probably not learning and growing.
Ritu Favre is the president of the Test and Measurement Group at Emerson, driving innovation, growth, and global impact in one of the most complex industries of our times. She's a seasoned technology leader with over 30 years of experience from the semiconductor world to biometrics, from executive leadership to boardrooms with companies like Motorola, Freescale Semiconductors, Synaptics, National Instruments, and many more.
I like to look at situations with curiosity. I love solving problems.
How do you balance this like a dance almost that you have to do as a manager or as a leader?
I usually will tell people, look, I am part of this team. I'm not just your president. And rather than saying, let me be very hierarchical, I work very closely within the team. And so same thing when I was in RF, same thing now.
The more you know, the more the unknown grows. I am Jitesh Vaswani, your host, and together, let's take this journey beyond the known. I'm honored to welcome you, Ritu, to Beyond the Known.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to the show.
Ritu, you have had such an incredible journey, right? First of all, I was going through your LinkedIn, and I've known you. Many people don't know that, but I was at Freescale as an intern when you were leading the RF group there, and you have had such an incredible career. And so looking back from your early days at Motorola to now, like leading this major global business, was there like a single sliding door moment, like a specific choice you made where if you had chosen the other path, your life would look completely different?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that from the career perspective. There might be more on the personal side as well. On the career side, I would say I started at Motorola in 1988 as a device engineer, working in the wafer fab. And about 4 or 5 years into my career, the head of that group came to me and said, "We want you to be a manager." And I was so torn because I had a master's in electrical engineering. I was doing a bunch of spice modeling, device modeling, and I had decided I wanted a career in just modeling and probably eventually would have ended up in some kind of design sort of a role. And so when he came to me, I basically turned him down and said, no, I want to go on the technical ladder. I really don't want to be a manager. He kept coming back. He said, you have potential. I see potential. You really, really need to take this role. If I had stayed the other way, I think it would have been a completely different journey. I think it would have been fine, but I've ended up having a much different career because I did go up the management track from the kind of the beginning of my career.
Yeah. And did you want to also share a little bit from the personal side of things?
Yeah, so I grew up in an extremely Indian household. My mom and dad immigrated from India. So a lot of our life was very, very regimented. So I graduated high school at 15, went to ASU, went and did my electrical engineering degree. By the time I was 19, I started at Motorola. I think one of the things that maybe could have changed some of that journey is earlier in my life deciding, maybe I don't want to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Maybe there is a different path that I would want to take. Eventually I did because I met my husband at Motorola. I ended up marrying him. It ended up being a interracial marriage that had all sorts of consequences inside my family. I think there could have been different paths that I could have taken earlier than I eventually did.
Like when we reflect in our lives, and because from LinkedIn you can see this very polished, successful resume, right? But all of us go through these internal, I would say, like internal processes or internal struggles, and those kind of depict the real story, right? And was there ever a moment, or maybe can you share a moment, maybe early in your career, where you felt like a complete imposter, where you felt like, oh, maybe I don't belong here, or maybe I belong somewhere else? A time where you were not so sure about, what you were doing and why were you doing it and things like that?
I would say that has remained the case almost in anything that I do, because my philosophy in life is if you're feeling too comfortable in what you're doing, you're probably not learning and growing. And so I have tended in my career to take roles that stretch me and push me somewhat beyond what even I think I can do. And the current role I'm in is a stretch. It's $1.5 billion business, 6,000 people. We just got acquired. That's the current role. But going all the way back, when I first came out of college and started at Motorola as a device engineer, I didn't know what a device engineer was. I mean, I knew device physics. I had been in, semiconductor fabs at ASU. But when you walk into what I walked into at Motorola, where it's 5 wafer fabs on campus, it's this gigantic mega campus. You walk in, you're kind of a new kid, just fresh with a AA degree. And they took me into the wafer fab, and I had no idea what I was doing. They basically said, okay, you're now a yield enhancement engineer. And I was saying, what is yield? What does that mean? How do you look at these parameters? How do you do all this analysis? So from the very beginning, I feel like, to your earlier point, I like to look at situations with curiosity. I love solving problems, but I don't walk into most anything saying, yep, I've got this. I know everything. I know better than anybody else. Typically, I feel like there's something I need to learn. I like to learn from the people around me. And I don't think that I walk into any situation thinking I know everything I'm doing and how to do it.
And it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that, right? Because whenever you're making a choice like that, well, I think especially just talking from a career perspective or anything else in life, like there's a path that can probably lead you to success, and there's a path that can, lead you to some sort of a failure or a mistake or whatever. But what people don't realize is like path to success also looks like a path through a bunch of like mistakes or failures. What do you want to touch upon that? Like, did you ever fail at something that you were doing, and like how did you overcome that and expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, at least from a career perspective, everything was always about learning, trying, failing in places and then moving. So probably another big tenet of my philosophy is grit, persistence, resilience. I mean, when I was running the RF team, when I joined that team twice. So I was there in 1999, and then I rejoined again in 2007. So when I joined the RF team back in 2007, the team they had been through a downturn. They had lost market share. At that time, we were competing with NXP, who eventually bought Freescale, and we were losing in the market. And so I walked in, became the GM of the business, and really began to work with the team on turning it around. And I had to try a lot of different things. So at that time, I brought various of the functions together. So packaging, device, design, really needed to get the team working in a way that they would collaborate to much, much better results. We had failures and problems along the whole entire thing. The team wasn't really gelling in the right kind of ways, figuring out, again, they were very, very beaten down. So it was, well, we've lost against NXP, so, we should just, kind of accept that. Eventually that turned into a real success because we did regain our market share position during that time, and really the business took off. But I would say every day during my career, there's a micro decision that you're making all the time about, okay, this worked, this didn't work. How do I pivot? How do I move? Another example would be back in 2003, the first time that I left RF, I moved to the analog business at Freescale, and it was a automotive device business. And there were a lot of challenges. The designs were not designed well. We were having customer issues. We were having recalls. And I was there for about 2 years, and I just could not get the business running properly. The team wasn't getting kind of gelling. We kept on having more and more problems. And that, when I look back at it, at that time, I felt like I really, really had failed at my job. Eventually, I kind of moved to a different role, sort of rebuilt from there. During that whole time in my career at Freescale, it was, okay, this worked. This didn't quite work. I need to check and adjust. I need to move. And again, it was keep moving, just learn, get some more resilience, and keep moving. So probably a couple of examples.
Yeah. So what were the 3 things? Grit, persistence, and resilience?
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. When I was listening to you now, for example, from your perspective, like when you're leading a team, so there's this aspect of, okay, maybe I did something like which I could have done better. But then how do you also deal with maybe my team could have done something better, right? Like, and or the other way around, when your team comes to you and says that, okay, I made this mistake, right? Like, or we made this mistake, we should have done this differently. How do you deal with balancing, first like an inner sense of reflection that, okay, I made this mistake versus, oh, also like, you guys could have done this better. Like, how do you balance like this, like a dance almost that you have to do as a manager or as a leader? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think the thing that I try to tell people as I lead teams, there's times where I'm your leader, I'm the manager, and it becomes much more of a that's the relationship. Most of the time in the roles that I'm in, I usually will tell people, look, I am part of this team. I'm not just your president. I actually am in this team, and we're trying to transform something, which is the situation that we're in right now. And rather than saying, let me be very hierarchical and say, okay, I will put you on this pedestal and then the team is here, I work very closely within the team. And so same thing when I was in RF, same thing now. It's my big thing is being very transparent, very authentic, very direct, and being inside the team. And so to your point, if I make a mistake, I admit it very openly. I should have done that better. I did that wrong. I'm very clear that was a mistake. I acknowledge the mistake. Here are the things I'm doing to improve. You have worked around me. I'm also have incredibly high expectations and of myself and of the team. So while I will acknowledge where I might make mistakes, I'm also pretty candid. Here's what you could have done differently. Here's what the group could have done differently. Here's how the team could have performed in a better or different way. But for me, it's very much about the outcome and then the way that the team is coming together to drive some sort of an outcome. So I'm pretty big on coaching for this is the way it could have been better. I'm not somebody that says, okay, I'm doing my annual performance review. You'll hear from me once a year. Anybody that works for me is getting real-time feedback all the time. And so most of my direct reports, by the time we're getting to performance review time, there's nothing much I have to tell them because we've been working on it through, throughout the entire experience.
Interesting. And then how much of it is okay, we have to achieve this outcome or achieve this goal and we did it, versus also how we did it. Was the journey from point A to point B, did we work together as a team? Sometimes you could achieve outcomes in a non-ideal way. So how much of it is for you is just achieving the outcome versus also how you do it?
I think I'm now at a point in my career where the how to bring a team together and how to achieve the outcome is more important, honestly, than getting the result. So early in my career, I was a very, very hard driver. Like, do this, do this, do this. I'm telling you how to do it. Go and do it. I have gotten to a place now where I get more probably self-fulfillment from coaching and bringing teams along. So as I'm working in this role, there are a lot of things that need to be transformed. And my biggest goal is to build a team that can be self-sustaining so that whether I'm here or my direct reports are here, we can create a legacy of a business that can run without every person sitting in their particular role. So a lot of what I work on now is coaching and mentoring people on how they can be within a team that is a high performing team. And so whether the outcome is achieve your bookings, achieve your profit, your execution of your R&D roadmaps, your go-to-market plan, for me, it's more end-to-end, creating a sustainable business that has a good culture, that people want to work in, that you can have the innovation. And so it's become more nuanced for me over my career.
And, so you bring up an interesting point. So this is what I'm very curious about. So now from let's say an employee perspective, I'm still an engineer. I don't manage a team. I've chosen that path, at least for now. And a major portion of how I think employees think, and I might be wrong, is to make yourself irreplaceable, right? Now, versus from, for the company to succeed, the ideal should be make yourself replaceable. That if one day you are not there, the processes still work, the company still works, right? And hopefully that in itself drives the growth, right? How do we balance this, making yourself irreplaceable versus also at the same time making yourself replaceable, right? Like it's like a conflicting thought.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen or observed in my career is that if you're in kind of a startup sort of a mode, you are going to have more people that are more irreplaceable. The people that are doing that very early innovation become something that in that phase of that company become irreplaceable. So you have to kind of think about the company life cycle as well. If you think about Motorola, when I joined in 1988, it was a $30 billion company that had, 150,000 employees. And something like that, typically you're not going to have anybody that's irreplaceable. There's a strong process. It's very robust. You come in, you plug in, and you run. So I would say that it depends on where the maturity of the company is and then probably the size. So if you're in a startup with 10 people, every one of them is irreplaceable, mostly. And that becomes, it's both good and it's bad, because if you have somebody that's irreplaceable and they leave, then your business fails. So what you want to do, I believe, is create a company and a culture and a set of processes that make it so it's not so painful if you lose a critical person. But then on the other side, you don't want to make it into such a machine that everyone's replaceable. And basically it's just a cog in a machine and there's no independent, nothing creative from your employees. So my view is you want to have very high performance. You want really, smart, innovative, good people to come into your business. But then you also can't get to the point where everything is a single point of failure, because if any one of those people leaves and your business comes to a halt, it becomes more and more dangerous. Kind of the bigger your business, the bigger your company, if you're counting on somebody. And I'm in a role that I took over. We had one person that ran the company for 40 years, and then he left. He was a founder. Then there was the CFO took over. Then the kind of the chief product officer took over, and then I've taken the business. And the company never transitioned from being founder led, really. And so a lot of what I'm having to do is exactly what you're saying. He was somewhat irreplaceable and had to retire. And so at some point, you do have to replace people, and you have to kind of think through, how do you bring the company on the journey where you don't have everybody be irreplaceable?
Interesting. Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I was also thinking like a major part of driving that growth, right, for anybody, whether it's, the team or ourselves, is unlocking the power of feedback, right? Whether it's positive or whether it's criticism or not criticism, like a constructive feedback. And what is the single hardest piece of feedback that you have ever received? And how did you process it? And did you get defensive about it? If you are open to sharing that.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think through. I think the part that over my career I've gotten feedback on pretty often is I'm pretty intense. I can drive very hard, a little bit about probably, being strategic, being able to summarize succinctly, things like that. And of course it stings. As when you're hearing something like that, it automatically stings. Over my life, what I've kind of come to is you take that in, immediately you have the sting in your feelings, and then you have to kind of continue to process it and then decide, is that something that you want to integrate, or is it something that, it was feedback that is interesting, but you don't necessarily want to incorporate it. My biggest feedback, again, has been, intense, driving, a pace setter. And as I've had different kind of coaching, because in my career and many executives' careers, there's a lot of executive coaching. What I kind of got to is there are things that I've incorporated into my style. There are other things that actually have helped me achieve what I've achieved. And so if I back off of that, then that actually will make me a less effective executive. So there's a piece of feedback in every way, whether it's good or bad, is something that in the person who's providing the feedback's view. And so as the person who's receiving it, you can't just say, okay, yep, that's it. Now I'm going to change everything about my style because I've received this feedback. You also can't be so egotistical to say everything about what I do is perfect. So it's one of these things that you have to kind of decide how to process as you receive feedback.
Quick pause. I want to share something I've been personally loving. You have heard me talk a lot about going inward, about nourishing the mind and spirit. But what about the skin we live in every day? Shankara's Ghee Sutra is one of those rare products where ancient wisdom meets modern skincare. It's crafted from ghee that's churned 10,000 times. Yes, 10,000. Blended with Ayurvedic botanicals like hibiscus, bamboo, and it penetrates deep, up to 7 layers, to nourish, hydrate, and bring your skin back to life. No harsh chemicals, no surface level fixes, just deep, authentic care from the inside out, like everything we talk about on this show. You can check it out at shankara.com, and trust me, your skin will thank you. The link is also in the description below. Now we go back to the conversation. And how important is managing your inner world and your having some sort of an emotional intelligence to be able to process it also, because I believe you can't be reactive about it, right? Because it stings, but then also how do you respond to it, right? Like how much of it is true versus could be just a perception and things like that, right? Like how important is that understanding of your own self and your own emotions. And
I think that's one of the biggest things that has been my journey, is really, really deeply understanding my own value system, how I react and how I respond. One of the things in my life that probably was the most life-changing was having children. Just learning how to have patience. There's no better feedback loop than children, because you can, you pour your heart and soul into this child, and what you pretty much get is, I hate you, you're awful, everything you do is terrible, I wish that, you weren't around. So if you want to talk about like really hard feedback, that is the feedback that's the hardest. And I think as I kind of grew up, between meditating, exercising, always trying to recharge and take a step back. I live in California, and so there's a lot of trees and mountains. Really being able to take in the world stimulus and then really spend some deep time thinking and making sure that I'm reflecting, and then integrating the parts that make sense, and then sort of detaching and letting go the pieces that aren't helpful.
You were saying the things that I love talking about, right? You mentioned meditation. I mean, I won't go deep into it, but you know that I've been with the Art of Living and do breathing. Meditation is a major part of my daily schedule. But I want to continue on your journey. So this is very exciting for me. So you also mentioned at one point about your transition, like how Emerson now bought off National Instruments, and that's been like a game changer for the industry. What's like one unexpected lesson that you learned while leading through that massive transition?
I think what probably is the most interesting is how all of the different pieces of my career came together for this role. So Emerson is a 67,000 person, $17 billion company. And I did something like that with Motorola, working in this large corporation kind of environment, because I'm running a business group similar to what I did at Freescale. I'm running a large business group. And then on the NI side, I think the part that has been, I ran all of the business units for NI, but now that I'm running the entire company, there was a lot of running the company, understanding the products, understanding the entire company that I had somewhat underestimated as I took the role on. For me, it was, as I took it, I was thinking, okay, I have to figure out how to integrate. I have to be part of a larger corporation. But the NI side probably was the most, I'd underestimated kind of how much I didn't know about the entire business while running the business units.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to be, able to even say that. And I think that's what makes you very, I'm sure like your team can attest to it. I was working around you for just a little bit, right? And I was an intern, and I think that's what makes you very relatable, that you are quick to say that, okay, this is what I did not know, or being able to accept one's shortcomings, not shortcomings, but you know what I'm saying.
There's places that I know that I've done well, and there's places I definitely can improve.
And for example, especially in the tech industry, so much of it is changing, right? And it's changing so fast. I think when you were leading the RF group at Freescale, and then when NXP bought Freescale, there was a lot of emphasis outside of RF, even on like the Internet of Things, right? And I think now that thing is AI, right? Like, what do you think? Like, what maybe like a fun way to put it is like, what piece of technology that we see in sci-fi movies is gonna be our reality in 10 years, or something that we'll be living with?
I think the world is fundamentally going to change. I was talking to somebody the other day that I think AI and some of the geopolitics are going to fundamentally change just the way that the world works. And it's going to be pretty fast, because I think if anybody that's been in semiconductor follows Moore's law, that was going at a pace, which is pretty quick. AI is going at a pace that's probably double or triple faster. So it'll be, we'll all be living in virtual hologram environments, and, there's sensors everywhere and everything is processed through AI. I mean, those are the kinds of things as 6G begins, be imagined. It's something along that line. And I do think AI will enable it, because everything is about data. And the more data that you can collect and process, the more that you can create these like you said, sci-fi movies. But if I look at kind of in technology, what I'm seeing is you have AI that will enable efficiency improvements in work. And so there's a lot that's going on about how do you just use AI to make work more efficient. In our case, we're also using that to have our software engineers become faster and more capable and do code generation. We also have a third, which is how do we incorporate this into, we make a lot of test products. So how do you put AI into test products so that you make the tester itself faster? But then as we provide that to our customers, it actually helps them get to product development even faster because of AI coprocessors or the way that we're doing data collection. So from a business perspective, I think it's going to enable a lot of efficiency. There's going to be a lot of work to make all of it work. And actually understand how to use it versus it actually slows some things down. But that's from a work context. I think from a life and a human context, I think the next few years are going to be very, very interesting.
And like, as companies navigate this future, right? Like I agree with you, like the way AI is taking over, it's, I sometimes like to design stuff. Like with one prompt, I'm able to design graphics, which would take me like a day before or a couple of days. So definitely it can make somebody more efficient, right? And then coming from like a hardware space, right? Like I'm still an RF engineer. I go to the lab, I tune stuff, right? Like I think that's where maybe there's still time for it to catch up until maybe somebody develops like robots and takes away our jobs or whatever.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day. They were telling me, like, tell me your rubric for making this decision. And I said, if I could give you a rubric, then AI could do it. I said, there is still some business intelligence and some human component to this that you have to acknowledge for the time being, or some level of experience and being able to make decisions we'll see how that plays out as time goes on.
Yeah. And while there's so much innovation happening, like, what do you think, like what is like the biggest mistake that some of the leaders are making as they deal with innovation like AI, or, and what can they do or what can they avoid doing to stay ahead of the curve?
I think you can look at it both ways. There can be some that are afraid to use AI, and so they'll put a lot of restrictions on being able to use ChatGPT or being able to use AI in the workplace. I think not just within a corporation, but even from a government level, thinking through how to regulate it versus continuing to use it to innovate, I think is going to be a wrestling match for a little while. As I look at kind of the way we're thinking about it within our shop, we are doing a lot of work to integrate AI into our products, use a lot of what's, out in the market. So I'm not seeing something that says, oh, there's a lot of mistakes. I think people just don't know what to do right now. And so everybody is feeling it out as the technology is developing.
Interesting. Ritu, for example, I remember this one instance when the first day I joined Freescale, there was this event that was happening at Tempe Town Lake, right by it, the Tempe Center for the Arts. And that was my first day. I walked in and like the whole company was coming together, and there was some sort of a workshop that was going on, how we can drive growth, how we can drive innovation. And I literally saw you commanding that room. And it was incredible to see that. And I always wondered, like, what does it take to not just be heard, but to be able to command the space and lead the space and make people have trust and faith and belief in your own leadership, right? So how do you do that?
I believe that it comes from a strong, again, I'm very, very aligned with my value system and what I'm trying to do at any given time. And in the RF business, I believed in our team, I believed in our technology, and I was incredibly passionate about it. I mean, I loved working with that team. And so for me, it was, I understood our technology, I understood how it could change the market, and just, again, had passionate conviction in this is the right way to go. This is the way we can do it. Anytime for me that I mean, in my current role, in any role, I have to really, really believe that what we're doing is the right thing to do, that it's going to disrupt a market space, for instance, and that the team that I have is this best, smartest team that can get us there. And then I'm super inspired and get all this energy and passion and just enthusiasm. So I don't know what or how, but I can say that there is something for sure that turns on for me if I'm in front of a large group talking about the thing that I'm most passionate about at the time, which is usually whatever I'm doing in my business, something forward.
And what does that belief look like visually? Like when you say like you believed in the team, like how do you feel that belief, or like what does it look like in day to day?
I think when I was with the RF team, I kind of grew up with them. So I was with that team for about 12 years. And so a lot of it just basically becomes like a extension of your family to some extent. And so literally I knew the team really well. I knew their capabilities. I knew where they had, strengths and weaknesses. And again, as I was getting up, I think by the time you had joined, the team was beginning to really, the business was starting to take off. We were starting to have success. And so for me, it was, the team was great. I led the team to kind of a new capability level. And then it was, this team can do it. Whatever we wanted to go do, we were capable of doing it. So being able to get up in front of any kind of an audience, I had so much faith in that team. And it's the same thing as I have changed or different parts of my career. It's how do you build these really strong teams, empower them. I want to be able to lead them forward, and then again I just then get a lot of energy from that.
Yeah. And let's say you believe in them, but how do you make them believe in them? Like how do you make a team believe in themselves?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of my job that is not just, oh, let's be a manager. There's a lot of it that's really deeply understanding the person. So like I'm very, very careful about who I select on my team, how I build the team, the kinds of capabilities that I'm looking for. I mean, you probably remember this. I get incredibly close to my team members. And so I get to know them as a human. I get to know them in kind of all dimensions. And then I'm able to say, okay, yes, you should plug in here. I can then kind of manage the team to get the best out of that team. There's a lot, I would say there's a lot of time that I've spent with a lot of people talking them through their leadership style. There's a guy that I work with right now that I talk to every Sunday that runs a portion of my business. And half the conversation is about, okay, where's the business? Where are you going? Half of it is just leadership. And his whole thing was, how do I get my team to wake up? How do I get them to perform at this other level? And then I've been coaching him through that. And he's now been trying and experimenting with the team and seeing some real results. And so it really becomes to your point about how do you wake the team up to get them to believe in themselves so that they can excel or reach their full potential. And that probably is one of the things that I enjoy doing the most in my career.
Yeah, I think there's some sense of fulfillment that comes with mentoring or coaching, or, as you're coaching or listening to, like you are more in the leadership world, you see people give advices and all of that. What piece of advice do you think leaders are giving out there, especially on social media and things like, which is completely wrong, and they should not be giving that advice?
I think some of the, focus on your happiness, which you should, of course, but, for me, there's a lot of this work-life balance, be happy. I think from a career perspective, yes, we should all be happy. Humans should be happy. We should have work-life balance. Again, this may be my upbringing, but having persistence, grit, resilience, discipline. If you're going to work, you should be working. You should be working to bring the team to where it needs to get to. You should be driving for outcomes. I don't go on social media very much, so I don't like social media at all. But that's the kind of thing I guess I see from time to time.
Yeah, and not to say that I think a major part of it is when the work is aligned with a sense of purpose, then work actually does not feel like work, right? And that's when I think you can be happy even while working. Like for me, I don't find any difference between when I'm, in the lab tuning or when I'm talking to you here or when I'm at home, because anything that I'm like, at least from these three aspects of my life, anything that I'm doing because it's aligned with what I want to do. And yes, there is definitely an aspect of it where I think commitment and feelings don't go hand in hand. And I think there's a sense of happiness, which is a bigger sustainable happiness, which is beyond feelings, right? Everyday feelings can be, okay, you can feel good one day and you can not feel good the other day. And that's where I think your formula of grit, persistence, and resilience goes very well, is like irrespective of your feelings, you show up. Right? Like irrespective of how you're feeling. Is there like a piece of advice that you would give? Of course, we have got this grit, persistence, resilience, but to the next generation of leaders, besides this, is there one piece of advice that you would give that can help them stay the course, become successful, and achieve the reality? Or make their dreams a reality?
One of the big things that I talk about is I mentor a lot of women, but it's the same for people kind of coming out of college, going into corporate America or into tech. One of the big things that I talk about is just find your voice. And as you start in your career, and especially for me, as I started in tech 30 years ago, you could walk into a room and it was very easy to be spoken over, or it would be difficult to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, I have an opinion here. So in the beginning, I think my biggest, people have asked me before, if you could go back 30 years and talk to yourself, what would you say? I would have said, don't be so worried. Don't be so stressed about speaking up. If you have a point of view, speak up. And then the further I got in my career, it got to, okay, yeah, I spoke up. I was talked over. And then I got to, no, just keep speaking up. You actually have to somewhat get louder and louder, especially if for me at least, I have pretty strong conviction on what's the right thing to do, what way do we need to go. And so I really learned to sort of trust my gut and also become much more vocal. And I think what that's helped with is it then makes the debate more diverse and vibrant, because you don't have just one person that's speaking up and kind of crowding over everybody else. You can then have a very nuanced, call it, set of recommendations so that the person above can make a good decision. For me, in my role, where I'm basically running the company, I want to hear from a lot of different points of view. And so that would be advice for somebody young coming out of school. That would be advice for anybody that's in their career. Speak up, because otherwise you're making suboptimal decisions.
And, for young engineers or young, not engineers, like anybody young, somebody starting out in their careers, I find that sometimes speaking up could be hard, because I remember when I was starting out, I was like, well, I don't really understand the whole picture, to be honest. Right. So when, for me, for example, and I'm going back 10 years, it's like when my own thoughts aren't formed, I don't even know what to speak up. Right. Like, so how do we what could that message look like also for the younger, people who are just starting out in their careers, and how do they transition into finding their voice and then eventually speaking up as well?
I think the best thing that people can do is just ask a lot of questions. I mean, again, back to your comment about curiosity, just be incredibly curious. And if you don't want to speak in a room room, at least speak to your manager or find coworker, speak to somebody so that begin to like kind of form these thoughts. I think as I kind of look around, you'll see some people that are just, pretty quiet, just head down. I mean, I don't think anybody knows how to do everything. And so this learning process, I think you have to have communication. You can't just go into a manual and read everything about how you're going to do it. There's this part. And I actually think that COVID was pretty difficult for this for people that were starting in the workforce, because it became okay, just do it remote. You can figure it out online. And I think, again, this might be old fashioned at this point, but I think there is learning to be had by getting in groups together and doing work together. So first would be just ask an incredible amount of questions. Ask in a large meeting, ask in a small meeting, ask with, a coworker, ask your boss. But I think it's just remain intellectually curious, no matter where you are in your.
That's an incredible advice. I think I've learned so much in just the, 40 minutes or 45 minutes or probably more, I don't know, that we have been talking together. And I know that everybody who's going to be listening in is going to find so much value in this conversation, Ritu. Is there a way, are you open to people contacting you for mentorship, or like, is there a way they could reach out to you and seek your advice or anything, like, if they have any questions?
Unless this ends up being thousands of people, I'm okay with, you have my contact information. I'm happy for somebody to email me. I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of coaching, and kind of anybody to some extent that reaches out, usually very, very happy to help.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ritu, for joining us today. And I hope everybody who's listening in did have a great time like I did. And I learned so much. Part of the reason why I'm doing this is also to be able to upskill myself, to be able to learn from successful people what they do right and what they did not do right, and forge my own journey into this world. So thank you so much, Ritu, for your time and for doing this.
Thank you, Jitesh. It was good to see you.